We're going to do all reading comprehension, 4 reading comprehension videos. Remember, all of this is live, no edits, no second takes, no snack breaks. So everybody who's joining us live, thank you so much for being here. Please keep feeding us comments, questions. I'm going to ask for a lot of participation, helps me make the webinar a little bit better. I know that can be a little bit boring for people who are not watching it live, but I love the feedback. Helps me feel less lonely. I'm in quarantine. It's been almost 3 months. Before we jump in, so my goal for today, we're going to try to get through 2 full passages. And I want to illustrate some principles that are kind of gimmick-free principles of reading comprehension. There is a ton of stuff out there where it's, oh, do this magical little thing and it's going to solve all your problems on reading comprehension. And after 20 years, that's embarrassing, of tutoring this stuff, I can tell you that most of those gimmicks don't work. If it sounds easy, sounds too good to be true, it almost certainly is, especially on reading. So I'm going to talk about 6 core principles for doing reading comp well. None of these things are magical. They're just kind of guiding things that I want you thinking about as you do reading comprehension on the GMAT. I'm going to talk about some gimmicks that I've seen before. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on those, but just give you senses of things that people tell us all the time that they're doing, and they come in and they're underperforming on verbal by 5 points, 10 points. And a lot of that might be driven by reading comprehension and silly things they've heard that are kind of in this land of gimmicks that cause them to, frankly, read badly. So core principles, things I want you to do every single time. And as we go through all the passages in this series, so hopefully we're going to get to 2 passages per video, 4 videos. So hopefully we'll do 8 of them together total. Core principle number 1, I want you to read for purpose and structure. So one of the worst things you can possibly do on reading comprehension, one of the worst fundamental things, is you just read for detail and you go fact, 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 fact. And then you're always going to get some sort of question that's what's the main idea? What's the primary purpose? And your brain is so locked into 8,000 facts that you go, fact? And that misses the point. The purpose is not a fact, right? The purpose is something broader about what the author is trying to communicate. So as once you're reading for purpose and structure, we're going to illustrate that as we go through all of these reading comp passages. Second thing I want you to do, always use cross-elimination. This is something that pretty much everybody does well. When I look on GMAT Club, we get questions all the time. Feel free to tag us, GMAT Ninja. We'll do our best to answer your questions on reading comprehension. People are pretty good about cross-elimination. I want you to do it in a certain spirit where you're always finding 4 wrong answers, and you need to have a reason why they're wrong. One of the worst things you can do across the board on verbal, this applies to sentence correction, critical reasoning as well. If you fall in love with an answer choice, that's when you get into trouble. You could think of reading comprehension, critical reasoning, sentence correction, all 3. 2 broad dimensions of difficulty. One dimension is, hey, it's hard to read this, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. So maybe you're getting legitimately beat by the difficulty of the language. That's one issue. But the second reason you might miss something, wrong answers that look right, right answers that look wrong. So something that might look really, really obvious, but it's 1 or 2 words away from actually being correct, but it looks like something you might have anticipated. So I want you using cross-elimination. So I want you crossing out 4 wrong answers because you know why they're wrong, not falling in love with 1 right answer. You could argue it takes a little bit more time, but it is 100% worth it, especially on an adaptive test. Third principle, don't overthink inferences. And we're going to address that hopefully on 1 or 2 questions today. We talked about this in another video back in maybe 2018. Quickly here, inference, dictionary definition, something that was not directly stated. Here's the really, really common mistake I see over and over and over on inference questions. There's an answer choice that's obvious, and people go, well, that can't be right. It's too obvious. They said that. Sometimes all an inference is a really, really simple restatement. Sometimes that's all it is. So don't overthink inferences. You're looking for 4 things that are not supported by the passage. That's it. Look for 4 wrong answers on an inference. That's all you need to do. 4th thing, official questions only. And I see we already have some questions about LSAT in the live comments. That makes me happy. So when I say official questions only, GMAT spends, as of about 10, 15 years ago, they were saying that they spent north of $3,000 developing every single official test question. So even the very best test prep companies, so GMAT Club tests, wonderful, produced by wonderful people. Some of the questions, unfortunately, I wrote. They're not great. I'm not spending $3,000 testing every question. I don't have a team of psychometricians running statistics on them. Official questions are a completely different thing. Even the best test prep companies, best test prep minds, no way they can compete. Stick with official stuff. So the objection that I know is coming is, well, there's a limit to the number of official GMAT questions. Correct. But I want you to do in that case, think about using the LSAT stuff. We're going to talk about LSAT passages a whole lot more in the 4th video of this series, which is what to do when you're really trying to go for that elite score. You're already good. You want to be spectacular, going from something like a 40 to a 45. We'll talk much more about the LSAT then. But use LSATs. Maybe GRE questions are an option. Just make sure it's official, because it is almost impossible for any test prep company, no matter how brilliant, no matter how well-intentioned, no matter how wonderful, to even come close. You will see some erosion in your feel for what real questions are like if you do too much non-official stuff. 5th thing, you guys are going to hate this one. Everybody hates this one, including me. Reading skills matter. And that sounds really, really dumb. That's not why you're going to hate it. Reality. So test prep companies, we're going to make a whole lot more money if we tell you, use my magic technique and that's it. It's all you need to do. Now, the reality is if your fundamental underlying reading skills are weak, you are going to have a ceiling on reading comprehension and critical reasoning and possibly sentence correction. And what I mean by fundamental reading skills is really 3 different things could happen when you read a passage, a paragraph, a sentence. You could understand it exactly, precisely, perfectly as the author intends it. Door number 1. Door number 2, you have no idea what it says, you get obliterated. Door number 3, you understand the gist, cloud of meaning is roughly right, but you're missing some of the accuracy of it. So depending on how much doors number 2 and 3 happen to you as you're reading, that's what's going to determine your ceiling on reading comprehension. So if you are fundamentally a weak reader in English, so I get people all the time who say, oh, I'm in the 20s on verbal, and how do I get to a 40? How do I get to a 45? I want a 760 on my GMAT. And we start talking to them and they say, I had one guy who said, yeah, I think I've maybe finished 10 books in my life. And I go, well, there you have it. If you haven't done much reading, your reading skills just aren't going to be great. It's not sexy, but it's the truth. So look in the mirror, be honest with yourself. If the issue is that you're reading these passages and the deal is you're just not understanding these sentences, these paragraphs, these passages, the reality might be that you need something much more than test prep techniques, much more than structure. And you might need to spend some time, 6 months, a year, becoming just better at reading in English, especially if you're a non-native speaker. Now, that's not to say that non-native speakers have a fundamental disadvantage. I don't think that's true. When I talk about fundamental reading skills, and the people that I can identify that I've worked with in the past who have great reading skills, a lot of them are non-native speakers. A lot of people I can think of I've worked with over the years, bad fundamental reading skills, native speakers. I actually had somebody who worked as a translator, English communications expert for a Korean company. She was actually American. Her reading skills were crappy. It was really fascinating because she made her career basically writing and translating and was a good writer and translator. But when it came to the precision of reading these passages, she wasn't very good. So it's not just about native, non-native. It's about how precise are you when you read. And that's something that I want you guys to look in the mirror. There's only so much we can do if you're struggling to understand the details of language. I won't say too much more about that after this first lesson, but I want you to be honest with yourself. If the deal is that you're just not understanding it, there might be something more you need to do over the long haul of 6 months, a year, maybe even longer to improve. Last thing, no gimmicks. What do I mean by that? Well, I've seen all kinds of goofy things over the years. A lot of them are really well-intentioned, but ultimately these sorts of things don't work. And I could make a much, much longer list. I could probably write 60 of these. So 1, skimming. It fascinates me that people still do this. There are test prep people, very well-intentioned ones, very smart ones, who still espouse versions of skimming. You have to read the passage. Fact. You have to understand the passage well. Fact. We're going to say more about what exactly you're looking for as you do these. I'm laughing at somebody saying that it's odd to watch me at normal speed because I guess you're watching this at 1.5 speed when you're not watching them live. Love it. Skimming, bad, not going to help you at all. If you don't really read it, you won't do well in reading comprehension. It's not called skimming comprehension. It's reading comprehension. Seems obvious, but again, I get this all the time. Probably half of the students I see who are struggling, who are underperforming their fundamental reading skills, half of them doing some sort of skimming. Don't do it. Related, there's all kinds of variations of skimming where it's read the first paragraph and then the first sentence, and that's it of the subsequent paragraphs. You read the first paragraph, you read the first sentence of every subsequent paragraph, that's it. That makes no sense either. Do you really think that this test is so basic that they're going to stick all the information in a paragraph, all the important information in the first sentence. Never going to happen. You hear anything that vaguely sounds like this, ignore it, run screaming the other direction. Third, I'm not making this one up either. Reading backwards. It's actually one of my all-time favorite students. I wouldn't be shocked if he's watching right now. I love this guy, but he'd read somewhere that reading backwards was going to help. And hey, there's something there that's not totally crazy, right? Well, what if you think that the author is going to get to their conclusion at the end? Start with the conclusion, work your way back up. There's an idea there. I totally sympathetic to somebody just starting out on reading comprehension, thinking it's a good idea. It's not. It makes no sense. Why would you read backwards? Reading the questions first. This isn't damaging, but it is not magic, because look, you're going to see 3 or 4 questions on every GMAT reading comp passage. You can read the first one. What does it do for you? Not a whole heck of a lot. Waste of time. Certainly not magical. Not damaging, but not magical. Another thing I see all the time is weird note-taking structures. And I've seen all kinds of stuff. There was a company once upon a time that had some weird, it was like a spider diagram or something. And people were so worried about the compliance of fitting the passage into this spider that they weren't thinking, they weren't reading. It became this sort of weird thing where it's like, I got to make my spider look right. And it's like, no, that has nothing to do with it. Note-taking is important. I'm going to talk about it a little bit more as we go through this first passage. But note-taking is a very, very individual thing. Don't make the mistake of thinking that the notes are the method. Note-taking is not a method. Notes are an aid to help you read better, understand better, hone in on what's important. Now, everybody's different. I think some of you might have seen me say this in a previous video. I learned a ton from when my wife was in law school. She would sit there with a different colored highlighter between every single finger, and she would highlight every single book, every single word in her law textbooks. And when I first saw her doing it, I was like, what the F are you doing? Like, are you highlighting every word in that book? She'd say, yeah. I was like, well, is it color-coded? Say, yeah, but that's not the point. Color-coded meaning, oh, the facts of the case were one color, the legal precedent was another, that kind of thing. She's like, that's not the point. It's like, then what the heck is the point? She said, well, I'm a very kinesthetic learner, meaning that as soon as her hand stops moving, she can't think. She's a former dancer. So for her, just keeping her hand moving, that helped her engage. For some people, more notes are good. For some people, because that might help you engage. For other people, what I say out of a lot of our students, if you start taking notes, especially if it's in the form of a spider or some other funny gimmick, your brain shuts down. And again, it's beside the point. What we want to figure out is, what should you be reading for? Let the notes reflect what you want to get out of the paragraph, and not let some external note-taking structure dictate how you think. It's not going to help you. Okay. Sixth and final thing. This actually, I didn't have this in my original list, but somebody asked about it in the first handful of questions on the live feed. Really appreciated it. Artificial time limits. This is one of the big ones, and I've seen a million versions. Take 90 seconds to read the passage, take 4 minutes to read the passage, no more than 6 minutes. Everyone's got a different version. There are a whole lot of problems with this, and this is thorny because, again, this is one of the things you guys aren't going to want to hear because it just kind of goes against what we feel is right. GMAT obviously is time limited. A lot of you probably know, okay, on verbal, you've got 1:48, 1:49 seconds, something like that. So, okay, I've got to sort of do the math on that. And maybe I do my sentence correction in 90 seconds and I've got 2 minutes per question for reading comp, that sort of thing. And then you kind of go, well, 13 reading comp questions, 4 passages, you start doing math. Cool, well-intentioned, seems like a really good idea. Here's the thing, different passages, different lengths. So how long should you take on any individual passage? Depends on the passage. We're going to go through ones that are pretty short in these webinars just because it's less cumbersome. We're a little bit limited in the format. Those should take you less time to read than the long ones. Makes sense. So don't get out of the mindset of, I've got to read this passage in 3 minutes, and you start setting timers, because what's going to happen if you restrict yourself? Well, you're going to read the passage too fast. You're not going to understand it. If you don't understand the passage, you're not going to do well on the questions. Fundamental fact, not exciting. Nobody wants to hear it. Everybody wants to hear that magical thing. Reality, read the thing. Don't get into these artificial time limits, because speeding you up and going, got to read faster, got to read faster, got to read faster, you're just going to come right back here and skip. You might not know that you're skimming, but reading faster does nothing good for you. And this is especially true on an adaptive test. If you miss easy questions that you're capable of getting right, whatever easy might mean for you, that's the kiss of death. Miss easy questions, you never see harder questions. never get to that elite score. Okay, that was my 15 minutes of sermonizing about reading comprehension. We're going to go ahead and go through a passage. Here's my assignment to you guys in the live feed. So what I'd love to have you do, so we're going to give you it's a 2-paragraph passage. It's an official passage. We're going to do all official stuff here. No Googling, that's cheating. I'm going to give you just the first paragraph. What I want you all to do, if you're watching this live, punch in what your notes would look like. And what I mean by that is, ideally, I want you reading that first paragraph and going, why? The author always has a purpose of some sort. I want you always reading for a purpose. Don't let that passage, don't let that paragraph turn into fact, beside the point, because they're always going to ask you about the big picture, especially on the harder questions. You've got to get to that second level thinking. Why is this here? How do these ideas connect? They're always going to ask you for the primary purpose or main idea in some form. And if you've just got this puddle of facts and you're just squeezing those facts, you're going to miss those primary purpose questions or at least struggle on them. So whole video is going to be about an hour today. And again, like I said, we're going to try to get through 2 passages. No guarantees we get to the second one because I just talked too much here. So what I want you to do, read that first paragraph and go, why? What does the author want from me? Can I get some indication of the author's point of view? The author's trying to convince me of something. What is it? Why is the author doing this? Is the author setting up some controversy in a field between 2 ways of thinking? Is the author setting up conventional wisdom in some field that now we're going to overturn? Maybe it's just background in that first paragraph, and maybe the author's purpose isn't clear yet. That's pretty rare, actually. Most of the time, you can see something in there. Look for clues that the author has a point of view. Look for clues that there's some sort of disagreement or some sort of theory being supported or debunked or something like that. And ideally, and it's, again, note-taking should vary. Everyone's a little bit different. But the types of notes for a typical person I want to see, 8 to 12 words. You should be able to get out why the author wrote it. And it should be pretty short, a sentence, a short sentence. So what I'd like you guys to do, so my wonderful executive producer, Shovik, proud graduate of the Ross School of Management, he is going to put up a slide, 1 paragraph official question. And what I'd like the live crowd to do, punch in what you think the point is. What's the overall purpose? What does the author want from you? And I'm going to model a couple of different ways of note-taking while you guys are working on that. I'm going to take a little bit longer on this first paragraph, so take your time. I'm going to be scribbling stuff in the background here. So I'll give you a minute or 2 on that first paragraph. And as you start to say, I think the purpose is this, write into those comments. All right, have fun, everybody. And sorry, it looks like there was a technical glitch. I didn't see it on my end, but apologies for that, everybody. And we'll give you another minute or two. I'm GMAT Ninja, not Technology Ninja, sadly. So go ahead, as you get an idea of what's going on in this paragraph, just give me your take on what is the purpose? What does the author want? Should be pretty short. And this is great. Keep the comments coming. Give you guys another 30 seconds or so. Okay, so we're going to come on back to the whiteboard. If you want, before you switch over, Shevik, if you need a little more time with this paragraph while I talk, feel free to hit the screenshot button. Take a look at it, pause the video if you need to. If you're watching it live, come on back to it later. All right, so what I have on the board right now, this is what I see out of a lot of students. And this is the natural tendency, right? So when we were in classes in university, maybe high school, actually, I'm going to be honest with you. Here's what I did when I wasn't really paying any attention in my classes in university. I would just take notes, stream of consciousness. I would kind of write everything down that the professor was saying, write stuff down from the slides or whatever, and not really pay attention. This is disengaged reading. And this is really, really, really common. There's nothing inherently wrong with anything I put down there. This is all from the passage. W.B. Du Bois, 1918, stopped advocating for equality, proclaimed solidarity with World War I. I could read through this. All I'm doing here is regurgitating the passage. There's no analysis going on. There's no thinking going on. This is not doing anything for me as a test taker. Number one, it's not doing anything for me. Number two, if my notes look something like this, chances are really good. I'm wasting a crap load of time, and that's not what you want. So not only is it a problem of time wasting, it's also a problem if you're looking at the wrong thing, looking for the wrong thing. So I'm seeing a great mix of stuff on the live feed. It's actually pretty cool. So there's some that are actually a little where I'm seeing people going a little too far and kind of saying, I've seen things that are kind of along the lines of, oh, W.B. Du Bois is, he's volatile. There was one in here that was a little bit judgmental, which I see how you get it out of this. But you want to go, okay, what is the author thinking here? What has the author provided us with? It's interesting. Right in the middle of that first paragraph, you kind of see this shift where it's like, okay, here's sort of the expectation, right? So a lot of African Americans, so here's what W.B. Du Bois started doing in 1918. He said, hey, stop agitating for equality. Let's have solidarity with white Americans for the duration of the First World War. African Americans were surprised. Why? So those African Americans viewed Du Bois as an uncompromising African American leader. He was somebody who opposed those accommodationist tactics. So he was somebody who was very opposed to accommodating white America. He said, hey, let's keep agitating for equality. But then notice the author's word choice there, right in the middle. It's in the, at least in the version we have up, I think something like the 5th or 6th line, 3rd sentence maybe. In fact, however, Du Bois often shifted positions along the continuum between Washington and confrontationists such as William Trotter. So basically, what are we saying here? I mean, one way to say it, and I'm going to use a few more words than I might normally, is African Americans thought that Du Bois was uncompromising. But here's reality. He often shifted between sort of the accommodationist views of Booker T. Washington, however you want to frame this, between Washington and Trotter. Accommodationist Washington, hey, let's work with white America. Trotter, confrontationist. Okay, great. So notice that there's a little bit of the author's point of view here, a little bit of the author's stamp on it, because the author's saying, hey, this is what everybody else thought. Here's reality. Now you're starting to see something that the author's trying to prove. You might even frame this purpose as the author is trying to show that reality was something different than what African Americans at the time believed. African Americans were surprised, but this author is saying, no, actually, Du Bois shifted positions between the accommodationist Booker T. Washington and the confrontationist William Trotter all the time. So there you go. Here's where you start to see the author's purpose in here. Quick thing real quick. So there were some questions right at the beginning of the webinar about, so what if I'm a non-native speaker? What if there's vocabulary I don't know? I think I saw 3 or 4 comments on the live feed about that. Great question. And it's actually relevant to this overall structure. So I can say 2 things that are true. One is, yeah, what are you going to do? Go memorize a bunch of vocabulary words, go get memorize a bunch of stuff. I'm not even a fan of that for the GRE and that test vocabulary. It's a different conversation. Go watch the webinar Shobik and I did a couple days ago. That's not a great answer, right? So building vocabulary is something you do over a long period of time. If that's a problem, maybe it's a sign you have fundamentally weak reading skills. So part of it is really tough to change in the short run. But actually, the GMAT doesn't go after tough vocabulary very often. And when they go after specific vocabulary, they're always doing something interesting. They always define it for you. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know that I had seen the word accommodationist until I saw this passage. I know what accommodation means. I know what it means to accommodate somebody or somebody else's views. So what's an accommodationist? Somebody who does that. Fine, easy enough. Confrontationist, I'm not sure I've seen that either. Confrontation, obviously most of us know what that means. A confrontationist must be somebody that embraces confrontation. That's the GMAT style. You're very, very rarely going to see vocabulary that is fundamental vocabulary that isn't defined in some way by the passage. So that's thought number 1. Second, this overall technique. So what I want you to get out of that first paragraph, out of every paragraph, is why? What does the author want? What does the author want? What's the author's purpose? Of course, you have to understand some detail to get there, without a doubt. Do you need to memorize every detail? Do you need every single word? Not usually, right? And I'm not advocating skimming, but you can get away sometimes with, hey, here's a little piece of this I don't understand. True story from a test I took probably more than 10 years ago now, I want to say maybe 12 years ago. When I took the actual GMAT, first couple questions, sentence correction, no problem. Third question, reading comp passage, same length as this, 2 paragraphs. First paragraph is really short. No problem, had it, understood it, no worries. Second paragraph, first 2 sentences, good. Last 4 sentences, I got obliterated. I had no idea what it was saying. I don't know what was wrong with me that day. Maybe it was written in Swahili. I don't know what was happening, but for some reason I couldn't make any sense of it. And guess what? I can answer the questions just fine without it. Is that normal? No, not necessarily, but sometimes that happens. I still understood why the author was writing it. There were some details that for whatever reason that day I wasn't locking into. I don't know why. I'm supposed to be a good reader, but that day I just couldn't get those last 2 sentences. So don't freak out if there's a piece you don't understand. Don't read that sentence you don't understand 18 times. Don't read that vocabulary word 12 times. Waste of your time. See if you can take a step back and go, do I still understand what the author wants? If you do, you win. You're doing all right. Okay. That's all I have to say about that paragraph. Let's go ahead and hit the second paragraph. Same thing here. I'm going to erase my mess I have here. Same thing. Read that second paragraph. And one slight change as you read through that. So yes, live crowd, I want you to tell me what you think the purpose is. What does the author want from you? First thing, most important thing. But I also want you to think about, how does that purpose connect to the purpose of the first paragraph? Because if you finish the passage, and again, just 2 paragraphs here, if you finish the passage, first paragraph, you're clear about the purpose. Second paragraph, you're clear about the purpose. You're clear about how those 2 things connect. And you've basically got your primary purpose question more or less locked down. It's going to be a different language, of course. I mean, they're not going to make it easy on you, but you've got the essence of it. All right. So go ahead and take a few minutes on that one. And can everybody see that? I know we had trouble on the first one. And I might have a lag on the comments, but if there's an issue, let us know in the live comments. Awesome. Give you guys maybe another 30 or 40 seconds. If you think you need more time than that, go ahead and screenshot the passage. And those of you who are done, keep sending, really appreciate the comments, guys. Keep sending me what you think the primary goal is of that second paragraph and how it connects to the first. Awesome. Thank you for that. All right, we'll have you guys coming back to the board. Seen a lot of fun stuff in the live comments. By the way, W.B. Du Bois is actually the correct pronunciation of the African-American leader. There is often a French pronunciation that I believe is Du Bois, or Dubois, I mean. So it's actually correct in his case. A couple quick things here. I'm seeing a wonderful variety of summaries of what this paragraph is about, and that's exactly what I expect. Some people are misreading a little bit. Yeah, that's reality. That's a reality that we have to face with reading comprehension. It does not sell tutoring packages. It doesn't sell courses. It doesn't sell books. If I say misreading is a problem, nobody wants to pay me to tell you that misreading is a problem, but it's reality. Had somebody comment that he's only read one book ever. Yeah, how do you improve your reading skills? Read more. That's a really, really big part of it. There's some great threads up on GMAT Club recommending some reading materials. I'll post an additional couple down the road here. We've got a list of fiction books we've been working on that we think really help. There's some research out there that says reading fiction helps you read nonfiction. Read a variety of hard things. Slowly, slowly, it'll make you better. Not sexy, but that's reality. So lots of great stuff, lots of correct answers or things that are different from each other, but still broadly correct and identifying the purpose here, which is wonderful. To me, I think the heart of this is really kind of, as it turns out in that first sentence, that okay, why is Du Bois shifting positions? It's his pragmatic response, right? So why the shift? This is just a pragmatic response for him. And then it goes on to say, in the face of social pressure, and then it goes on to kind of give a little bit more color on kind of when he changed things, why, what he did at the end of World War I. So at the beginning of the passage, we're kind of framing this about this editorial he wrote in 1918, where he was kind of taking this accommodationist stance while he switched back to confrontational as soon as he saw abuses of African Americans returning from action. So yeah, seeing some great, great things here. This passage, by the way, is I'd say is kind of a little harder than average. It's not super hard yet. The second one that we'll probably not get all the way through, but we'll work on a second one here today that's quite a bit tougher. Okay, so once again, don't get into the habit of saying, I'm going to get through this faster, faster, faster. That's beside the point. Make sure you take the time to understand it. But understanding is, if you've got enough to get the big picture, get the connections, get the purpose, that's okay. The details are always going to be on the screen for you. You're always going to have what you need right there on the screen. Don't need to boil the ocean. Don't need to squeeze every detail out of it. I'm also getting a bunch of questions about note-taking. Here's the thing. I care about, this is what I tell my students all the time. I care about this process of thinking through the passage, thinking through the big picture, thinking about connections. I care about that process. I care about it happening in your head. Here's the question. Does it help you to also put it on paper? That's the question. If it does, and I think for most people it does help, just to remind yourself to do it. I think writing a little something down is good for most people. It's not true for everybody. If you think you can nail that process of thinking about purpose, connection between paragraphs, and you don't need to write anything down, but you're still doing this, great. I'm happy as a clam. You don't need to write it down. Other people need to write a little bit more. My wife, for example, if she's not writing, brain goes dead. There's actually research that says for people who are that deeply kinesthetic, even if she was just sitting there writing a bunch of nonsense, just squiggling, just doing this, she actually reads better because she's so deeply kinesthetic. That's a rarity. It's maybe 10 or 15% of the population. But if that's the case for you, yeah, maybe you need to write more. Maybe not this. But I'm okay if the notes are a little bit bigger. What I don't want to see is the knee-jerk response where everybody goes in and just says, I'm going to write down every detail. And I see that from people who really do not benefit whatsoever from this. So again, notes are an individual thing. If anybody tells you all notes should look like X, that's a mistake. It's a very, very personal thing. What works for you is different than what works for me. Very different from what works for my wife in all likelihood. That's great. A typical person might be kind of a minimal bit of note-taking, 8 to 12 words per paragraph, that kind of thing might be average. Maybe no notes is better for you as long as you're doing the right thing in your head. Maybe more notes, don't go too crazy. A little bit more notes might be better for you as well. Just depends on you. Also getting questions about the whiteboard. This is going to be a very obsolete statement very soon here, but very soon, the online GMAT right now, you've got the online whiteboard. That's about to be obsolete. I think that's going away really in the next few days. So kind of a moot point now. If you are taking the GMAT online in a few days, plenty of threads. I think we have literally a couple thousand posts on GMAT Club about that. But you're going to have your physical whiteboard very soon anyway, so don't worry about that. Okay. Let's go ahead on to that first question. I think we're just going to do, well, we'll see how this goes. I think we'll do one question here and then see if we can get through the second passage. So we'll go ahead and give you that first question. If you could pop that on the screen, please, Shovik, and we'll give you a minute or two to solve this. And as you get your answer, please pop it up on the screen. Let me know what you're thinking. Be honest. Please, no Googling. That's no fun. Doesn't help you. Doesn't help us. If you're making mistakes, that helps me make the content a little bit better. So please tell me what you think. I want to see what your misconceptions are. Awesome. We're seeing some disagreement. Keep it coming, guys. Give me another 30 seconds. Please don't be shy. All right, this is great. All right, come on back, everybody. And if you need to take a screenshot of the question, keep thinking through it. That's wonderful. Okay, sorry, I'm getting a note from my executive producer there. All right, come on back. Thank you, everybody, and I really appreciate that there's lots of disagreement. That makes me happy. One of the things I've seen on some of these live webinars, I'll sometimes see herding where the first people say a wrong answer, and then everybody who admits their answer is saying the same answer, and it's wrong. And then all the people who are quietly going, I don't want to put myself out there. Put yourself out there. Nobody's going to judge. It's great. If anybody judges this positively, I'm really, really happy when you guys let me know when you have a mistake. Helps us make things better. So seeing a really nice mix of mostly A and C. I'm seeing some D and E in there. There might have been one B. So go through these pretty quickly. A, identifying historical circumstances that led Du Bois to alter his long-term goals. There's nothing about Du Bois altering his long-term goals. He alters his tactics depending on his short-term goals and what's going on, but he's definitely not saying that I'm going to alter my long-term goals. And is that really what the passage is primarily concerned with? Alterations in Du Bois's long-term goals? Actually, really not at all what it's about. It's an alterations in his tactics and why he might do that. And it's built on the specific instance, right? So that first paragraph is talking about, well, hey, here's what he did in 1918. And he kind of surprised people by shifting from what they thought was his strong confrontational stance. All of a sudden, he sides with the accommodationist. Well, why did he do that? And it talks in the end of that first paragraph about specifically why. And then second paragraph says a little bit more deep stuff about, a little more detail about why he did that. It's not that his wartime position reflected it. So we'll read that first sentence of the second paragraph. Du Bois's wartime position thus reflected not a change in his long-term goals. Right there, we actually have a pretty clean contradiction of what A is saying. So he's not altering his long-term goals. He's making a pragmatic response in the face of social pressure. And that's what he does. That's his fundamental way of being, going back and forth between accommodationist and confrontationist. And here's why I did it in this particular case. All right, there goes A. B, I don't think anybody picked this, or very few people did. I'm actually getting some answers of F, which means that this is tough. B, defining accommodationism. There's actually no strict definition of it, and it certainly isn't the primary concern to define that. And it also really isn't exactly the point to say that we're defining accommodationism and then showing how he used this to achieve his goals. Yes, that's part of what he was doing in this particular scenario, but that's not the overall concern of the passage, and certainly the definition is not a primary concern. C, accounting for a particular position adopted by Du Bois during the First World War. Yeah, really that whole first paragraph is about this position where he was trying to proclaim solidarity with white Americans. So he seemed to be siding with the accommodationists. Well, why did he do that? Well, A, fundamentally, that's what he did. He shifted positions depending on the circumstances. And then what happens in that last paragraph? Well, it's focused on Du Bois's wartime position and why exactly he did that in the face of societal pressure. So C sounding pretty good. Now, by the way, is C perfect? Are right answers on verbal ever perfect? Sometimes. But this is part of why I argue so hard for cross-elimination always. I want you to find 4 that are wrong. Maybe you look at C and go, I'm not sure it's perfect. That might be what a lot of you are thinking. Cool, keep it in. I would also be totally fine if you're not buying what I'm saying about A. If you want it on your first pass to go, well, maybe, okay, keep it in. That's fine, that's normal. Take a second pass. First pass, you cross out the ones that you're certain are wrong. Maybe you're down to 2, totally normal. D, contesting the view that Du Bois was significantly influenced by Washington or Trotter. Not contesting that at all, actually. It kind of hints that he was influenced potentially, or at least his views matched those two at different times. So it doesn't make any sense to say that they contest that view. D is out. And E, assessing the effectiveness of a strategy. There's nothing here at all about the effectiveness of that strategy. It's just justifying why he took that strategy and explaining that. So E is out. All right. We are 46 minutes in, and what I think I'm going to do here, I'm a little bit worried about trying to take on a brand new passage because I think that's going to be a little bit much. So I've got a passage I really, really love. I think I've literally answered, there's 8 questions on the passage. I think in the last few weeks, I've answered maybe 6 of them on the GMAT Club forum. So I'm going to save that for one of the next videos. And we'll go ahead and do this, the second question I had teed up for this W.B. Du Bois passage. And then we'll call it a day, and I'll give you guys a little bit more color on what we're going to do in the next 3 videos. And Shevik can get you some links to kind of the descriptions of those videos. So let's go ahead and do that next question, please, Shevik. And same as always, everybody, please, as soon as you have an answer, pop it in there. If you have doubts, if you're just going, man, I'm stuck between B, D, and E, put that in there. Again, it's great for me to see what you're struggling with. Helps us make the content a little better. So go ahead and take a moment. Give me another 30 seconds. Okay, coming back, everybody. And if you haven't already, and you're not done, need another minute, hit the pause button, go ahead and screenshot this. Okay, so mostly seeing pretty good answers here, which is nice. So the author of the passage refers to Washington's call to African Americans in 1895, primarily in order to. I'm going to say something that's going to sound really silly, but I see it all the time. We see it all the time on GMAT Club. Don't read the question too quickly. I see a lot of habits where people are out there trying to, something funny is going on. I don't know if you guys can see me here, because I'm seeing the GMAT Club logo and that's it. Okay, I think we're back. Wouldn't be a GMAT Ninja video without technical glitches. Okay, so one of the things I see all the time, and this, again, this is going to sound really silly, is I see people reading the question too quickly. Everyone's so amped about time. Got to go faster, got to go faster, got to go faster. Well, what does that do for you? How much more time does it take to read this a little bit more carefully? 6 more seconds to make sure you've got it. 6 seconds is a rounding error. Take the 6 seconds. A lot of people blast right through the kind of the purpose piece of it, right? So the author refers to Washington's call to African Americans in 1895 in order to do what? So sometimes it's those details that fall away. It's a really silly thing, but I say that probably accounts for 10, 15% of the errors we see on questions is just not reading the question carefully enough. People jump to categorize. Don't worry about the categorization. Just answer what's asked. GMAT's creative about giving you different varieties of questions here. One other quick wisecrack about the question itself before I move on. Notice as we talk about this general framework where I want you to think about purpose, connection. How do these paragraphs connect? How do these ideas connect? What does the author want from me? What does the author want from me? De-emphasize the details a little bit. They're still important. Get the big picture, get the purpose. Part of why we do that is notice that even the question that kind of sounds like a detailed question, talking about Washington's call in 1895, even this, you can't answer it just looking at those couple lines. So what good does it do you to say, well, okay, I'm going to go back and read that sentence. In 1895, when Washington called on African Americans to concentrate on improving their communities, et cetera, Du Bois praised Washington's speech. That's not where the answer is. The answer is in understanding the entire context of the whole passage. What role does that sentence play in the context? As you get to higher and higher level questions, harder and harder questions, you see you see a lot more questions that look like detailed questions, but in reality, what are they? They're details in the context of the big picture. So as you climb the ladder and you're getting 700 level questions, 750 level questions, you're not going to see a whole lot. You might not see anything that just says regurgitate line 17. That's not hard. That's a 400 level question. What you're going to see is, why did the author write line 17? And that's why in your initial reading of the passage, I want you to focus on purpose, focus on the big picture, make sure you have that locked down. Okay, enough sermonizing. Let's run through this question real quick, give you a couple announcements at the end and send you guys on your way. A, identify Du Bois's characteristic position on the continuum between accommodationism and confrontationism. No, there is no characteristic position for Du Bois. That clearly isn't why this was brought up. The whole point is that he doesn't have a characteristic position. He shifts depending on the needs at the time. And in this specific context of his call in 1918, here's why he did it. B, explain why Du Bois was sympathetic with Washington views in 1895. There's actually no explanation there in that sentence. Doesn't say anything about why he did it in that particular case. It kind of moves on and talks about, so that sentence about 1895 basically just says, here was Washington, the accommodationists, call, Du Bois praised him. 8 years later, Du Bois goes to the other end. So we don't really know exactly why Du Bois does it in 1895, so it's not B. What about C? Clarify how Trotter's view differed from those of Washington in 1895. No, we see nothing at all about Trotter's views in 1895. We see something about Trotter's views in 1903 and his views overall as a confrontationist. D, support an assertion about Du Bois's tendency to shift his political positions. That's bang on because it's saying, hey, 1895, accommodationist. 8 years later, confrontationist. He shifted. That sentence just reinforces that point about how Du Bois shifts, or the fact that he shifts. E, dismiss the claim that Du Bois's position was consistent with his previous views. Has absolutely nothing to do with that. Okay, we are coming up on an hour, so we're going to call it a day here. A couple quick announcements. So again, this is video 1 out of our 4 video series on reading comprehension. What we're going to do in the next 3 videos. So we're getting questions in here about specific types of passages. I think somebody brought up science passages earlier. So video number 2, that is next Monday. Thank you so much for that, Daisuke. And I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Apologies if I'm not. So we're going to do on Monday, same time, 9:30 Pacific, I believe. We're going to talk about science passages. And what I see a lot there is a whole lot of fear around them from certain people. Other people love their science passages. But for people who don't have a science background, there's a lot of fear there. So we're going to talk about addressing that. And we're also going to talk about kind of what the GMAT is fundamentally doing. And I'll give you a quick sneak preview. There is no advantage to having any particular background. And actually the GMAT tests, all standardized tests, all good ones anyway, test pretty carefully to make sure that there isn't bias in the questions. And that might mean bias by background. So if you don't have a science background, you should perform just as well as somebody that does. There's never going to be specific terminology. So if there's something that you're struggling with on science passages, it's psychological for the most part. So these basic premises, these basic ideas, this basic structure that I want you to think about as you read, if you apply that to every kind of question, the topic shouldn't matter. Because of the way the GMAT's written, there should be no advantage for you based on your background. If you're a science person, not a science person, should make no difference at all other than psychologically. That's what we're going to talk about on Monday. Wednesday, we're going to take a different topic because I see a lot of fear around literature, cultural passages. So people with technical backgrounds often go, oh boy, here's something about 18th century feminist Italian poetry, and they get intimidated by it. But I'm going to make the same exact comment. No background in that. There might be something psychological where you don't feel good about reading it. Maybe you have a hard time enjoying it, engaging in it. But if you apply the techniques, do it methodically, you're going to be fine. And fourth and final video next Friday. It's kind of what I've done with some of the other videos in our series. With sentence correction, for example, I did a video that was how to go from good to spectacular. So something like a 40 level on your verbal, something like a 45 level on the verbal. And what we're going to do there, I'll talk a little bit about the LSAT. I might use an LSAT passage. The problem is they're really, really long. And I think that makes for less entertaining viewing. These basic ideas, these basic concepts, these basic ways of approaching passages, absolutely the same. Doesn't matter the length of the passage. Apply them consistently. Learn to make them your own. Make sure your notes are working for you. Doesn't matter if it's short or long. But I do want to kind of tackle some really tough passages there. Haven't totally decided which ones yet. So again, Monday, overcoming your fear of science passages. Wednesday, overcoming your fear of literature, cultural kind of passages. Friday, going from good to great. We'll tackle some really hard stuff. All right. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. And huge thanks. I love all the participation, everybody. That just makes me happy. It makes me feel less alone in this time of quarantine. I haven't left these four walls very often. So everybody be safe out there. Smash that subscribe button. Come see us on the forum. I think we've got some good links up there. If you have comments, questions, things that you want to see in the next 3 videos, please post something on that. We've got a page that has all the these 4 reading comp videos with links to them up on the GMAT Club forum. So if you have something you'd like to see, a certain passage maybe, I'm happy to take requests. So go ahead and put something in there in the next few days. I'll do my best to accommodate if I think it kind of fits the content and how I want these videos to feel. And please, if you haven't already, GMAT Club, YouTube channel, biggest, best, hit that subscribe button. There's a GMAT Ninja YouTube channel, tiny, not as great, tiny. And again, join us tomorrow, if you're watching this live, tomorrow, Saturday, 9 a.m. Pacific, to hear from Olga and her GMAT in Frankfurt. So another one of those great debriefs, something wonderful about kind of seeing people's experiences firsthand, what worked for them. And everybody's suffering just like you. If you think this is never going to come to an end, watch some of those debriefs. People get through it. So thank you for joining us, everybody. Be safe. Have a great weekend. Have fun studying. And we'll see you Monday.